All right, so it's very, very clear and apparent that something has to be done in the WNBA. We are ready to get into the second half of the season, but thus far, the first half of the season has been filled with negative drama, nasty news articles, the WNBA looking like the complete circus and clown show that it is. Kathy Engelbert clearly cannot handle the job, and I believe that this is the time Adam Silver is about to step in. The signs have been pointing that way. He clearly inserted himself on the Caitlin Clark-Alyssa Thomas.
Nobody expected the WNBA's most unstoppable defender to be a boardroom full of executives in expensive suits. Somehow, a rookie who was supposed to adjust to the league ended up forcing the league to adjust to her instead. What started as welcome to the pros quietly became a business emergency, and by the time Adam Silver got involved, this was no longer about hard fouls or hurt feelings. IT was about protecting $1 billion future that suddenly looked one cheap shot away from disaster.
I kind of want to talk about this because this, for me, is the worst one of the worst takes I've ever seen in my life. And it is hilarious looking back on this. Let's take a listen.
I don't know if it's going to be Caitlin doing it for Caitlin. I think an external event has to happen. Raven Johnson starts, right?
Or, oh my God. Can you imagine? Like,
I literally cannot.
I literally cannot imagine Caitlin getting cut.
Raven Johnson is only entering the starting lineup if it comes at the expense of...
There was something almost ironic about the way professional women's basketball found itself standing. At a crossroads, the league had spent decades searching for the kind of superstar capable of attracting millions of new viewers, generating sold-out arenas, convincing major broadcasters to pay premium prices for television rights, and turning casual sports fans into loyal followers.
So I'm going to start with kind of a development in the Alyssa Thomas situation. She was suspended a game after that foul on Caitlin Clark. Since then, she was receiving a lot of hate, death threats, etc. Caitlin Clark herself also spoke out and said nobody in the league should be facing any kind of harassment. According to multiple sources, Adam Silver contacted Kathy Engelbert and told her something needed to be done. Like, essentially, he pressured her, allegedly.
Then, almost overnight, that player finally arrived, instead of simply celebrating the opportunity. However, the conversation became dominated by something far less glamorous. Every spectacular three-pointer, every dazzling pass, and every sold-out crowd seemed to be accompanied by another replay showing Caitlin Clark being knocked to the floor, bumped away from the ball, or absorbing contact that left fans wondering whether the officials were watching the same game everyone else was seeing.
People are giving Caitlin Clark some props today. Props because she is one of the only players over the weekend who actually tried to give fans what they paid for at the All-Star game. Jason Whitlock earlier today, he said Caitlin Clark put the WNBA on the map. Caitlin Clark saved the WNBA. And then Saturday night's All-Star game, she looked left, she looked right, and she saw her peers make a mockery of said All-Star game and destroy.
What began as a basketball discussion gradually transformed into something much larger. IT became a debate about leadership, business, entertainment, and the future direction of an entire league. Every hard foul generated thousands of reactions online.
Silver just said today, the commissioner of the NBA, he wishes that Clark had been put on the team USA Olympic team.
Why didn't you say that, Rudy?
Because they're tired of funding this goddamn league.
They're tired of funding the league.
And I watched another podcast where there's a guy who does a lot of data stuff, and I'll tag him on this. I forget his name, but I watched this guy's podcast, and he said that the projection this year for the WNBA is to lose $50 million. I don't know how.
Television analysts argued over whether Clark was simply receiving the traditional welcome reserved for rookies, while millions of new fans looked at the footage and struggled to understand why obvious off-ball contact often escaped punishment. The disagreement was no longer limited to basketball strategy, because every controversial whistle carried financial implications that stretched well beyond the court. Inside league offices, Executives were watching the same highlights as everyone else, but their perspective was entirely different. Fans focused on wins and losses, while league officials examined television ratings, sponsorship agreements, merchandise sales, ticket demand, and long-term investment. Each time Clark stepped onto the floor, another set of attendance records seemed to disappear. Indiana Fever games became some of the hottest tickets in merchandise. Sales surged across multiple franchises, not just in Indiana, because Clark's arrival drew attention to the league as a whole. Every successful business indicator pointed upward, yet every unnecessary collision on the court reminded executives how fragile that momentum could become if their biggest attraction suffered a significant injury.
The first half of the WNBA season, obviously for Caitlin Clark fans, was riddled with, back injury and, just non-clarity on her day-to-day, game-to-game situation. One minute she's playing normal, the next minute she's on a minutes restriction. The minutes restriction never comes off. Then she's off. I mean, it's just been a circus. All of the brutal attacks, all of the negative, nasty things that have happened throughout the league early on that is kind of taken away from.
Clark's journey into professional basketball had already been unlike anything women's basketball had experienced before. Her extraordinary career at Iowa transformed her into one of the most recognizable athletes in America. Long before she entered the WNBA, her remarkable shooting range changed defensive schemes in college basketball, while her passing vision and competitive personality made every nationally televised game feel like a major sporting event. By the time she reached the professional level, expectations had climbed to ordinary heights, reinforced by endorsement deals worth millions and a fan base that followed her every move. What nobody anticipated was how quickly the conversation would shift away from basketball itself. Rather than focusing exclusively on Clark's scoring ability or before she even received the basketball. While physical defense has always been part of professional sports, many observers believed these incidents crossed into territory that officials were failing to address consistently. The flashpoint arrived during one of the most talked about moments of the season. Chicago Sky guard Kennedy Carter delivered an off-ball hit that sent Clark crashing to the hardwood before an inbound pass had even developed into a basketball play.
Oh, Kathy's a goner after this season. Once that season wraps, she's out of here. Okay? And we've been asking for that. We've been asking for a new commissioner of the WNBA. However, I fear on who Adam Silver is going to replace her with. It came out that Kathy did not want to suspend AT after her incident with Caitlin Clark. And then Adam Silver rings her phone and is like, no, you're going to suspend her ass. Flagrant 2, $1,000. And Kathy's hands aren't clean because Girly Pop, you should have a backbone. You're running this league. You can sit there and be like, I'm not doing that because it's wrong. And I truly believe she knows she's going to lose.
Initially ruled a common foul, the play was later upgraded by the league office to a flagrant one after review. Although the revised decision acknowledged the severity of the contact, public opinion had already hardened. Fans questioned why intervention came only after the game had ended rather than during the moment itself, when stronger officiating might have prevented the controversy from escalating. That single incident became symbolic of a broader concern that IT was no longer about one foul or one player every previous clip showing between aggressive defense and repeated non-basketball contact that officials seemed reluctant to penalize. Meanwhile, executives faced a problem that statistics made impossible to ignore. Clark's games consistently generated television audiences that dramatically exceeded previous league averages. Local markets experienced record ticket demand. Merchandise bearing her name disappeared from shelves almost as quickly as retailers could restock it. Sponsors who had invested heavily in women's basketball expected their partnerships to be associated with elite athletic competition, not endless discussions about player safety. The situation forced league leadership to ask uncomfortable questions. If the league had finally discovered the commercial breakthrough it had pursued for decades, could it really afford to allow inconsistent officiating to jeopardize that opportunity? The answer became increasingly obvious as financial reports continued exceeding expectations.
Of Alyssa Thomas. And I think this is a big deal. I feel the suspension escalated the situation. And it's like, why is there this focus on this punishment as opposed to what I feel is a lack of focus on protecting these players from harassment. And I know there's only so much they can do. We're going to talk about Chelsea Gray and what happened with Chelsea Gray this week. The Aces released a statement saying, "We do not condone or support this behavior. We're with Chelsea."
Clark was not simply another talented rookie. She represented a transformational business asset whose influence extended into virtually every area of league growth. That reality inevitably brought Adam Silver into the conversation. Although Kathy Engelbert serves as WNBA commissioner, the NBA owns a significant stake in the league, making Silver deeply invested in its long-term success. Every increase in ratings, sponsorship revenue, and media value strengthen the overall business. Conversely, any prolonged absence involving the league's biggest attraction carried consequences that could affect broadcasters, corporate partners, franchise valuations, and future expansion plans. Reports soon emerged suggesting that senior leadership had begun examining officiating standards more closely. Rather than treating each controversial call as an isolated mistake, officials reportedly analyzed whether more physical styles of play centered around post-battles and interior defense. Clark's unique style exposed weaknesses within that transition, much of her offensive impact